Those who criticize our generation forget who raised it, and also forget, or just don't have a clue, what position they have left us in. So it is our turn now to fix what has been done, and we must stand up, and we must stand up quickly for our next generation, for our grandchildren, before it's too late. So I just want to ask you one question, and that question is, what does freedom mean to you?
Here's a question for you. Could Congressman Ron Paul be President Paul next year? He's the best shot the Republicans have, says my next guest. With me now, Fox News political analyst and my colleague and friend Juan Williams. Juan, it's a pleasure. Looks like you're in the mountains somewhere, but welcome to Freedom Watch.
Yeah, I'm in Salt Lake City.
All right, great place, a beautiful town. Has Ron Paul succeeded in changing or moving the political debate after 25 years of being in public life during this, his third run for the presidency?
I say this with amazement, but it's becoming more and more clear that we live in the age of Ron Paul, Judge. I mean, you stop and think about it. Who's the father of the Tea Party? It's Ron Paul. I mean, Ron Paul's the guy who began the conversation about debt, deficit, high taxes, government intrusion, and initially he was viewed as an extremist, an outsider in terms of the Republican establishment, somebody to be ignored. He's the guy that's from the start raised questions about U.S. involvement overseas in places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
He's raised questions about the drug policy. I just heard you talking about that guy getting arrested down in Louisiana and put away for life. He's been saying these things, and the Republican establishment has treated him like he's their loony uncle. Well, now, all of a sudden, guess what? Ron Paul, not only is he the father of the Tea Party that won the majority of the House for Republicans in the 2010 midterms, but he's the father of so much of the discussion about the budget, about the debt ceiling, about taxes right now. This is the age of Ron Paul.
All right, can he translate his having moved the debate into areas that he has been educating the public about for the past 25 years into votes? Stated differently, were you surprised to see that CNN poll 2 days after the Republican debate that showed him having the best shot of all the Republicans, not just those at the debate where you were one of the questioners, but of all the Republicans against President Obama?
I was stunned. Again, to me, it's like a revelation, and it's just becoming clearer and clearer about this thing. I keep saying age of Ron Paul. The question is, do the big money people start to give some credibility to someone like Ron Paul when they see the CNN poll and see that he actually is outperforming the Palentis, outperforming the Gingriches, outperforming the Romneys, the Mitch Daniels? That's the question, and I don't know the answer to that yet, but if in terms of moving the argument, moving the conversation on not only drugs but Afghanistan, personal liberty, the debt, that's all Ron Paul.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a senior advisor to Ron Paul, and a lot of people they saw Winston Churchill. He was a pariah in his own party, to both parties. He often voted alone in Parliament, and he was ridiculed by the press, but he was right. And if your viewers Google September 10th, 2003 Ron Paul, they will see him before the House Financial Services Committee predicting the housing bubble, describing the morality of millions of homeowners losing the value of their homes, of the mortgage lending crisis. All of this was seen in advance. And
so how important is that aspect then, the fact that you had to presciently seen a lot of what's going on? Because then the next command is, all right, well, great, you could see into the future and predict a lot of this, touche. Now we expect you to be the guy to lead us out. How does he pass, or others even pass muster there?
Well, morally, the problem morally, the British people looked at Chamberlain and Baldwin and they said, hey, if they knew this crisis was coming, why didn't they tell us? And if they didn't know, why did we elect them? And there's the same sentiment today. If George Bush knew the housing bubble was coming, and if Obama knew that his stimulus program wasn't going to produce any jobs at all, why didn't he tell us? And if he didn't know, why is he in power? And why not turn to somebody who seems to know? So that's how these sort of things do happen historically.
Dr. Paul, I'd like to begin with you. Every debate begins with a specific policy question, but this is a little different. Someone on this stage hopes to be able to take the oath of office 14 months from now, and at the end of that oath are the words, "So help me God." When you hear those 4 words, if you have the opportunity and the privilege to say them, what will come to mind?
Well, I think they're very important. We take those of us who have been in Congress and served in government, we take an oath frequently. We take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's what we do when we take an oath when we're sworn in as president. We emphasize this. But I think what that does, it emphasizes it even more so because of the significance and the importance. And it reiterates the fact that we swear to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law. And to me, this would mean that you're not only saying this, in front of a small number of people, not only in front of the nation, but before our God, which means the significance is that much greater. So those of us who have done this before, and I've taken my oath rather seriously, very seriously, and believe that I've done a very good job in upholding the Constitution, and even when sometimes it's difficult. And this to me would send the signal that by saying, "So help me God," I really will obey the Constitution and that pledge. I think the issue is obviously very important, and we can charge one side or the other of influencing our culture too much. But the goal of government isn't to mold society and mold people. The role of government is to preserve liberty, so we as individuals assume the responsibility and our families assume responsibility. Our values should come from our family and from our church. But once we say, well, the liberals are doing this because they want this economic interference and we're going to have perfect balance and fairness, they overdo it. But you can do it on both sides. You can say, well, we're going to make people better by having more laws. I think culture is very important. Culture has a reflection on the law, and I think that is very good. But the law can't reflect the morality of the people. If you do that, you have embarked on something where you sacrifice liberty. Once you turn this over to government, when government assumes this role, it can only do that at the sacrifice of liberty. So our goal ought to be to preserve liberty so that we have our religious values and we make our own decisions. If we can make our self-determination for our hereafter and our spiritual life, certainly on our own personal habits and our economic habits and how we spend our money, certainly we should assume that the people can do this. The guidance should come from individuals, from our family, and from our church. The early church struggled with this. I mean, Christ came, Christ taught about peace, and Christ was to be the Prince of Peace, and we were to defend that. But early on, the church struggled with this, and St. Augustine came up with the principles of the just war. I believe in them. I think we should follow those from a religious viewpoint, but we have a constitution that is very clear to guide us to try to prevent these wars. And that is that we don't go to war without a declaration. The wars that we have fought since World War II are all illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and all were unwinnable, and it was tragic. It was tragic because we did it by failing the rule of law, and the tragedy now of these wars of the past 10 years. 10 years, and we have been so complacent. It added $4 trillion to our national debt. 8,500 Americans have been killed in these wars. 44,000 have come home wounded and crippled. Hundreds of thousands are looking for help. And we want to blind ourselves to this. And it isn't in our national defense. It was mischief. It's getting involved where we don't need to be involved. I think it is an utter tragedy of what's happening. And if you want to talk about a family life, there has to be somebody in this audience that has been the bearer of bad news, either a loved one lost or a loved one crippled. And it's on and on. I had one soldier come to me the other day, and he was so against the wars, and he spent 3 or 4 tours over there. And he says, I lost so many buddies, and I don't know why we were there, and there's no signs of progress over there. But he says, now I'm losing my buddies to suicide. The wars destroy the family, undermine the family, as does the economic climate. The bad economics and war is 2 most destructive things to the family, and we ought to concentrate on that, and we can't concentrate on the economics unless you look at the business cycle, why we have inflation, busts and booms. Otherwise, we will continue on a downhill path.
All you have to do is let your voice be heard.